You seem to want to have a solution overnight.
Your government in the election promised to make us the most powerful economy, the strongest economy in the G7. You're the ones who set that expectation, not people who are asking questions of you.
Anita Anand sat down with Vassy Kapelos after Donald Trump introduced 100% tariffs on films made outside the US. Not only did Anita Anand struggle to respond to yet another tariff, she was called out directly by Vassy for giving Canadians just liberal spin instead of honesty, which is reflected in the recent nosedive in the polls for Mark Carney. Let's take a look.
I want to pick up on the economic resilience part because you gave some examples in Mexico, Indonesia, and in Europe. Your opposition at this moment in time says that you're essentially conveying something that isn't true. That in Indonesia's case, for example, that deal was actually arrived at in November of 2024 before this prime minister took office. That in Mexico, there's not anything really tangible besides an agreement saying that you want to work together more. That even in Europe, CETA is largely in place and that there's no sort of proof of what those expanded relationships will actually mean for Canadians. Can you respond to that criticism that basically you're advertising something that isn't fully actually provable?
Actually, they're grasping at straws. Canada is the only G7 country that has a free trade agreement with every other G7 country. We have strong trade relationships. What we are doing is enhancing already existing strong trade relationships by making sure that we're leveraging our international relationships. So with Mexico, for example, the work that we are doing is to expand the scope of the relationship, to ensure that we are putting on the table Canada's competitive advantages in the area of critical minerals and energy, for example. And so work, of course, has been ongoing, but in this moment of time, what you are seeing from Prime Minister Mark Carney and our broader team is that we are doubling down on the efforts to expand our trade relationships. And that is what you will continue to see. The EU partnership is a great example. Now, as a result of that agreement, Canadian companies have the ability to compete on the same terms for EU contracts that EU businesses have. That is a difference, Vassy. Trade relationships, economic relationships among countries are complex. Canada is on a good footing, and we are enhancing our trade agreements, our economic relationships right across the board.
You smell that? You smell it? It's a bunch of BS. That's what that is. And this is what Vassy does. She takes the points from the opposing party and throws them all at the person that she's interviewing and see what happens and see if they're right. Well, here's the thing. We already have CUSMA, right? We have the Canada, US, Mexico Free Trade Agreement. So we have that. So what exactly are you doing down in Mexico? Oh, let's expand our trade relationships. Great. Okay, fine. That's not really going to do anything. Then she says, well, we're the only G7 country that has a free trade agreement with every other G7 country. And, the whole focus of Mark Carney since he took office is Europe, 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 Europe. Well, here's the problem, folks, especially when she says Canada is on the same footing as businesses in Europe. No, they're not. Let's be real here. No, they're not. Because a business in Europe that wants to do business with another business in Europe and get to the European market, guess what? They pay very minimal fees and very minimal cost to actually get that to market. Canada has to go across the ocean. The ocean. So you're either sending it by ship or you're sending it by air. That's an additional cost that does not put the Canadian business on the same market. And let's be real, Mark Carney and the Liberals are trying to sell this as, well, we don't need the US. We have all of this other market in Europe. Well, let's just take a look at Stats Canada. This is the government's own website, and let's see how much business we actually do with Europe. This is from StatsCan, folks, government's own website. In 2024, Canada's domestic exports on a customs basis totaled $721.1 billion, with 75.9% of these shipments destined to the United States. Other leading destinations for Canada's domestic exports included, these are the leading ones, folks: China, 4.1%, United Kingdom, 3.7%, and Japan at 2.1%. So when she's talking about the other G7 countries like France and Germany and the rest of them, we're doing basically a percent, like 1% of trade with those other nations. Hooray. Now, that doesn't mean that the companies that are doing business with those nations and markets in those nations aren't betting from it. Of course they are. But what the suggestion is, and they're trying to have Canadians fill this in with their own thoughts, is that we don't need the US. We're signing these new agreements in Europe, and all of that can go to Europe instead of the United States, and we don't have to rely on them. But that's bull. It is complete garbage. You cannot substitute the geographical relationship that we have with the United States, which is one of the most, if not is the most lucrative market for business and trade in the world, to Europe. I'm sorry, but that doesn't hold water. Otherwise, we would already be doing that. You don't think capitalism, which prioritizes profit over everything else, wouldn't already be doing that? The reason why they're doing profit or business with the United States is so they maximize their profit. That's it. That's all there is to it. And the other piece that they really kind of skip over, but I need to kind of let it slip there, was companies now have the opportunity. Great. So we have these free trade agreements with these other G7 nations. Hooray. Companies still have to leverage those agreements, but they're not going to. Why are they not going to? Because it's more expensive for them to do that. And if it's more expensive for them to do that, then send it to the US, tariffs or not, then they're never going to be utilizing these free trade agreements. Yet Mark Carney and the Liberals are going around saying, oh, tens of billions here, 70 billion here, trying to throw these massive numbers so Canadians think, oh, Mark Carney's actually doing something. He's a real banker. He's a real economist. He's the genius that we voted in. No, this is for show. And that Indonesia agreement, yeah, that was already there. You know how much business we do with Indonesia? It's less than 1%. Yippee-yi-yay.
What, with respect, though, Minister, will those enhancements tangibly mean for Canadians? I understand the strategy imperative behind it. I think strategic imperative, I think most Canadians do, right? We have become so reliant on the United States that we have to look to become less reliant. But how soon will those efforts bear fruit for Canadians who are looking at a second quarter contraction of the economy to the tune of 1.6%? The closest country in the G7 that even, comes anywhere near that is Germany at a contraction of 0.3%. Like, we are faring worse than other countries right now.
Actually, Vassy, what you need to do in building a strong foundation and diversified trade relationships is continue to pursue those relationships, not retreat. Canada, as I said in my speech this morning, is a multilateral trading partner with many other countries. We are going to ensure that those trade agreements benefit Canadian businesses and Canadian workers. This is a time where it is not only Canada that is seeking to further diversify our trade relationships, but every country I'm speaking to here at the United Nations has similar goals, which is this is an area where we see greater protectionism and unilateralism in the global economy. Canada, for our part, will continue to work within multilateral organizations on defense and security. That's NATO and NORAD, for example. In terms of the economy, that's the WTO and individual multilateral trade agreements like CETA and like the CPTPP. These are fundamentally important to the Canadian economy as well as the global economy. And Canada will work to further enhance our leadership on the world stage as other countries retreat towards greater protectionism.
Did you catch all those acronyms? So the question was, what benefit is this going to provide to Canadians? Well, here's a bunch of acronyms, and we need to be pursuing relationships, not retreat from them. With the U.S. being the exception, right, Anita? Because you don't want to pursue that one, right? You don't want to pursue that one. Let's just pursue everything over in Europe. Right. So the answer is I don't have an answer. Here's a bunch of word salad and a bunch of acronyms that Canadians are not going to understand, and I hope that they're impressed by it.
Is your government, though, being honest with Canadians about the degree to which that notion and those values and those endeavors that you just explained will actually supplant our economic relationship with the United States? To give your previous government credit, you signed a number of significant free trade deals with different regions of the world that came into effect during that 10-year period, and we still remained trading partners with the United States to the tune of 3/4 of all of our exports consistently through that decade, heading to one single location. So when you talk about enhancing the relationships, the Prime Minister often says, we can give ourselves what others don't, implying that we'll be able to supplant what we lose with the United States. But the facts just don't bear that out, at all. So why not just be honest with Canadians about it?
Actually, I do not agree with your frame. This is being honest with Canadians in the sense that we have a trading relationship with the United States where 75 to 80% of current trade is covered under that agreement. When we talk about the sectors that are not covered, our government will, A, support those sectors as we have with steel and aluminum, for example, as we have with the auto sector, for example, and we will also work to diversify our trading relationships so that there is even greater opportunity for Canadian firms and Canadian workers to benefit from multilateral trade relationships. And I want to stress that changing the composition of a trading relationship does not occur overnight. We have work to do to ensure that we're leveraging the free trade agreements that we have signed. Again, the only G7 country that has such extensive trade agreements across the board. And we'll work to ensure that Canadian businesses are cognizant of those trade relationships that already exist. But you're going to see us continue to sign additional new agreements with other partners. The EU example is just one. Indonesia is another. And of course, I'm traveling to India, Singapore, and China in a few weeks, and I'll continue to ensure that the Canadian domestic economy is on the table for greater enhancements of our domestic economy.
Are you kidding? So you just tried to sell Canadians that, hey, all of this is great because we're moving everything out of the US and we're shipping everything to Europe. Vassy, not saying this is what the Conservatives are saying. This is what Vassy is saying. So this is not Conservative talking points. This is her saying, yeah, but you're lying. You're lying to Canadians because you're saying that we can move everything out of the US and supplement all of that with trade in Europe. And that's a lie. You can't do that. The facts do not support what you're saying. And then Anita's like, oh, but 80% of our trade with the United States is free, so that's great. Like she pivots all the way the other side, saying we have the best deal in the world with G7. And then she pivots to the complete opposite side again and saying, oh, but we're for everything that's not covered, we have all of these new trading relationships that companies can take advantage of, and it's great. Are you kidding? Are you kidding? This is the gymnastic that's going on here, and I love that Vassy opened with the fact that your government previous, under Trudeau, was bragging about these new trading relationships that they were signing all over the world. Guess what? Nothing really changed. Why? Because it's more profitable to do business directly with the US, and it's cheaper to do so, despite all these tariffs. That's the thing, because, like, what? You're just going to change your entire export model? And I don't understand. I really don't understand, and maybe this is my lack of economic policy and geopolitical understanding. How are we going to make money by exporting something from Canada to Indonesia and India? It usually comes the other way around. This is why we only ship 4% of our goods to China, and a lot of that is food, right? A lot of that's food. So what do you think we're going to be exporting to these countries where they're usually making it for cheap and shipping to us to sell? Canadians, this is the level of gaslighting that this government is going to try and show that they're doing something. Yet our economy shrank by 1.6%. Businesses are not going to take advantage of this. They would already have been doing so if it made sense.
Do you think your government will be able to change the balance? Like when you said it's not something that can take place overnight, do you think that is ultimately possible? And what should we as Canadians, I guess, interpret from the fact that your government is not anywhere close to matching the tariffs that are in place from the United States, that you've made a cognizant decision not to hit back in a commensurate fashion, and as the opposition would accuse, be elbows down now?
Well, Vassy, you're kind of overlooking the point that I made just a second ago, which is that 75% to 80% of our trade is already still occurring under the North American Free Trade Agreement. The second point I want to say, and that in answer to your question, is yes, I do. I do believe that we will continue to be able to enhance our trade relationships with new partners, and we will be able over time to further diversify the Canadian economy.
Ladies and gentlemen, the introduction of the brand new Liberal talking point. That's my belief anyway, is that, oh, well, Canadians, you have to give us time. You have to give us time to fix the economy. It's not going to happen overnight. Wait a minute. Didn't Mark Carney say that this government was going to be a government that moves at a speed that has never been seen before? That there's going to be rapid fixes, that there's going to be rapid progress. Oh, well, nothing happened like you thought it was going to happen, or maybe you knew it wasn't going to happen. And now your government is pivoting to the point with Canadians, you have to give us time. It'd be unfair to judge us on the fact that we've accomplished literally nothing, and all we're doing is flying around, burning carbon, by the way, in our jets all over the world, signing these ridiculous fake agreements that don't do anything except give businesses options that they've already had for the last decade. And we want you to just give us more time, because it would be unfair. It'd be unfair for you to judge us now. This is now the new Liberal talking point. Well, we need more time, Canadians. You have to give us more time. You can't expect results within, the first 8 months of a government. That would be unreasonable. If it was unreasonable, then you shouldn't have made the promise, then, should you?
Pakistan happens to be the third largest importer of canola in the world. We agreed as foreign ministers to continue to have this conversation at every level so as to ensure that there are other markets for Canadian farmers in the area of canola. This is just one example.
I'm glad, Minister, you brought up the example of canola, because we spoke with Michael Kovrig the other day, who reminded me back in 2018 when China leveraged a whole suite of tariffs on canola. The lesson to the government at the time was supposed to be to diversify markets, and instead as a country, we just drilled down on the Chinese market, which I think informs another challenge to your government, which is that is an example of when the lesson was not heeded. And you're telling Canadians they should just trust you on face value now, and that this government, just because there's a different prime minister, will heed that lesson and be able to diversify. I'm not overlooking the fact that you put forward. I'm offering a challenge based on the history of the Liberals over the last 10 years who have not been able to capitalize on those agreements and fully diversify markets.
And this is the problem, folks, and this is what the Conservatives have been saying. It's the same Liberal government. Nothing has changed. Oh, but this time, trust us this time. Canadians are done trusting you. They're done. And there's no proof that they should continue trusting you. If anything, there's proof that they should continue to distrust you because you're lying to them. Vassy called you out earlier and you had a word salad response and nothing to say about it. So no.
You seem to want to have a solution overnight. What I am saying is that this takes time, but we are not letting our foot off the gas in terms of ensuring that at every turn we are advancing Canada's economic interests and Canada's leadership in multilateral fora so that we are not only benefiting the Canadian economy, but we're contributing to the growth of the global economy as well.
With respect, I certainly don't think that something can happen overnight. I think there are 80,000 people in Canada who have lost their job over the last 6 months who are hopeful that this isn't sustained. And I think that, your government in the election promised to make us the most powerful economy, the strongest economy in the G7. Yes. You're the ones who set that expectation, not people who are asking questions of you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And the election was on April 28th, and we are here now in mid-September.
I love the fact that Vassy calls them out and says, you made these promises. You said that the Canada would be the strongest economy in the G7. You said that. You haven't done anything. Now, I'm not even going to bother to show you Anand's response because all she says is, oh yeah, well, we signed all these agreements. See, and it can't happen overnight. Yeah, I think the problem is they've kind of gotten themselves into the situation where they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do about Trump in the U.S., so they're just trying to go around and make agreements and kind of hope for the best. But Canadian businesses aren't going to be taking advantage of that because of the costs. It doesn't make any sense at all. At all. And the good thing is that Canadians are seeing this. They are. They're seeing that nothing is happening. And I want to show you how this is reflected because Nanos Research, which is one of the more liberal leaning polls, they've been showing an interesting trend over the last few months. Check it out. So ladies and gentlemen, this is our graph that we've created, and we took the specific data points of Nanos Research on what the Liberals were polling at in terms of the percentage of Canadians that would vote for them if the election was held that day. So you can see in June of this year, they were at 45.2. And if you follow that all the way and you see their latest poll in September at 42.7, you can see that they've lost almost 10% of the support that they actually had. And the most interesting part about this is that not only are they showing the Liberals coming down, they're showing the Conservatives coming up, and the gap between the Liberals and the Conservatives, according to Nanos, has shrunk from double digits down to just 4. That's huge. That means that gap has shrunk by over 50% since June, right? June was basically the peak of the honeymoon period. And not even a few months later, they've dropped by 10% and the gap has decreased by over half. So this is very significant in that Canadians are seeing what's going on and they're not buying the Liberal spin. And I think even mainstream media is starting to worry about their viewership numbers. And I think they're seeing that Canadians are are actually showing a really high level of mistrust over what they're saying. So they're trying to pivot back here and there, because we even saw CBC call this stuff out on what the Liberal government is actually doing. Because if all they're doing is cheerleading them, they are going to see an acceleration in all of their viewer numbers, which means they're not going to make any money, which means they're going to go out of business. So imagine that. The media is now forced to tell the truth in order to save their jobs. What a world we live in, folks.